Yeah, silence please. Alright, so we'd like to welcome you all to Politics Society. We are debating whether politics should have a place in music. And I mean, it's for Rag Week, so if we could have donations at the end, it would be nice. So yeah, the structure, we're going to have, so we have people, we have Mr. Marlowe and Mr. Martin arguing for it, and these two arguing against it. First, Mr. Marlowe is going to come up, and he's going to speak for 3.5 minutes. Then, will it be Sam? Yep, Sam next, saying what he has to say, then Mr. Martin, and then Jordan. So, we're going to ask first what the audience think, whether you think politics should have a place in music, so if we could have hands up, just to see around. Alright, so that's about half, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the hand over to Ryan.
Alright, so we'll just introduce the speakers again. So on my far right, we've got Sam Yately, inspiring anarchist and political activist. To his left, we've got Jordan Henson, up and coming MC. He's going to be giving an insight into the music industry. To my left, we've got Mr. Marlowe, the renowned and to his left, we've got Mr. Martin.
Always standing. So jealous.
All right. Okay. Just like to thank Harsham for the organising of today, and also like to thank Sam and Jordan for agreeing to take part. Now, myself and Mr. Martin are going to be proposing the motion that politics should have a place in music. I'm going to make 2 key points, and then Mr. Martin's going to pick up on some broader themes. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the fact that musicians, those who are in the music business, those who have a high public profile because of their creativity, because they are known for their musical statements, can often use that public profile to affect positive political change in a way that few others can. A few examples of this just to show you this is a practical reality. For example, Bob Marley in 1978 organised the One Love peace concert in Jamaica against the backdrop of very intense political violence, and Bob Marley brought together the leaders of the People's National Party and the Jamaica Labour Party, the 2 feuding political factions in Jamaica at the time, and the dons and gunmen that those leaders controlled, and brought those 2 leaders together and formed a temporary truce really between the 2 factions. There would have been no one else at that point in time in Jamaican society who had the profile, had the impact and the pull to actually get those 2 leaders together. Meanwhile, in 1970s and 1980s Nigeria, you had the late great Fela Kuti, Afrobeat pioneer, who was an incredibly eloquent and fierce critic both of the corrupt civilian governments that Nigeria experienced in those times and the brutal military ones. And his music and the club he ran, the Shrine, which is kind of like a countercultural space really in Nigerian society, that really provided a focal point for the opposition to the Nigerian government. And again, Fela, he used his position in society to speak out. He was beaten many times by the Nigerian military, imprisoned as well, but he never lost that desire to use his profile to speak out. So we've got the fact that if you do have a public profile, if you do have a recognition and a status through music, if you use that in the right way, you can positively influence politics. Now, secondly, you've got the fact that musicians will often be able to provide a commentary on events in a way that few others can, and often will be able to encourage people to participate in the political issues of the day. For example, the 2011 London riots, and more broadly the English urban riots, the media coverage of those was extremely one-sided. Even the BBC, which is meant to be neutral, took a view that this was kind of feral, depraved behaviour, that there was no justification, that this came purely from a kind of an unfocused rage and anger and a greed as well. There was a lot of stuff about selfishness and being out for yourself. but a lot of the grime and hip hop artists who actually live in those communities, who experience the kind of deprivations that day-to-day people do in those communities, provided a much more nuanced and multi-layered take. You've also got the fact that musicians often help to create and sustain progressive youth and social movements, which really challenged the establishment. For example, in the 1970s and 1980s, the Two-Tone movement, the Two-Tone label, the music it produced, which fused punk, reggae and ska, brought together black and white performers effectively. That became a focal point for the anti-racist movement in this country at a time when the Conservatives were becoming ever more xenophobic, when the National Front was regularly out on the streets, and when the Labour Party had basically abandoned the fight. So I think for those reasons, and for those that Mr. Martin's going to elaborate on, politics should certainly have a place in music.
Thanks very much, sir. I now hand over to Sam Yately.
Alright, how's it going? We, the opposition, oppose the proposition that politics should have a place in music. Just like to start with some rebuttal of points put forward by Mr. Marlowe. He said that music is a positive and powerful tool because musicians have this creative presence for the spread of positive political ideas. This is true. However, the spread of negative political ideas is just as prevalent in music, and if not stronger, because of the whole connection with the mainstream influence that it has and had. So basically, with the Two-Tone movement that was mentioned there, of course in the 80s led way to the Strength Through Oi racist ska movement, the racist skinhead movement, which was a negative, encouraged the, shaking his head there, don't quite agree with that, spreading the, the more xenophobic and anti-black, this genre of music which had such two-sided, influences in it, which were spread through the music, and there were a lot of gigs organised in small areas where white people would attend because it was a more extreme form of political activism. National Front members, a lot of whom were fans of this sort of music. I mean, you've all seen This Is England, so you can see that the culture went hand in hand with the politics, which was negative. Others like the dance hall movement in America, in kind of the urban areas in late 80s, early 90s and that sort of thing, which was anti-racist but also very homophobic, and would spread anti-gay messages in the music alongside the anti-racist messages. And in this way, it just shows that politics has a negative influence if used badly in music, as well as the positive influence that it has. I also like to move on to the point that politics detracts from the art of music. Music is meant to be an art form. Art is about escapism from the reality of today, of the everyday life. And when escapism is key, politics is pure reality. So any influence of politics on music ruins the escapism of the art form, and as such detracts from the concept of freedom through expression. I'd point out artists like the Japanese drone and ambient artist Merchbo, who uses lyricless music most of the time to convey simply a sense of emotion rather than political message, and it transcends the almost petty concepts of political music through its simplicity and through its purity as music, not propaganda. Also, music with an agenda detracts from the concept of music. Music should be made for art's sake and music's sake, rather than for any kind of agenda, because it cheapens the concept. With the example of Bob Geldof and the Boomtown Rats, who took the sort of more extremist punk movement of the era of the late 70s, and used it to for his own political aims. Some would argue were perfectly legitimised, but some would argue were too mainstream, too neoliberal, and just not basically music shouldn't have politics in it. Cheers.
Hand over to Mr. Martin now, who we're all here for.
know, I think is missing in politics today is that it used to be an art form. If you think about the speeches of people like Martin Luther King, the problem with politics today is it lacks art, and there's no great speakers, and that's what gets people. That's what gets people, and it's sad that things have come to the state where you have to actually. If a politician speaks today, do you really take note of the politician? Do you really take note? Yeah. And compare them to the likes of Winston Churchill and even Margaret Thatcher. You can remember the things that they say because it was like an art form. Speech making was like art form. Now art has always reflected what's going on in society. It's only recently, it's a new concept that art is divorced from society. As an art student, that's what we learn. Spent a day of my life learning about how art is influenced by society, and if you think about, let's take Animal Farm. Is it a book about animals, or is it about the Russian Revolution? Right, and where I'm going with this is this, that you cannot take music out of politics, and you can't take politics out of music. The people who make music, they have their views on life, and that's going to be reflected in what they produce. So you can't divorce it from politics. It's life. Everything you do is life, and the problem with young people today is that they're not engaged with the political process. But if they have their favourite artist and their artist has a certain view, it makes them think about politics. It makes them think about what, views on certain things. I remember when Black Eyed Peas was talking about terrorism, and you mentioned the National Front movement. Right, and what they were saying was, you're going over to the Middle East to fight terrorism, but you have movements like the KKK that are terrorizing American citizens, and they were saying, well, what is that all about? And what you said earlier on about all of these movements, the two-tone movement. Those views would have been expressed anyway. You can't blame the music for that, because those people had their views. I was alive during those times, they had those views. Is that right? 30 seconds. So I think art and music it's just a form of expression. It's a form of expression.
Thank each of the speakers for their preparation. Oh, sorry.
Okay, firstly, Mr. Marlowe, you were saying how people can use music to promote political change in a positive light, but as Sam said, it's quite easy for that to be misconstrued and that to be used in a negative light as well. If, for example, you had people who were supporting more radical members of the BNP creating music, it would create, obviously, negative music. That's just a simple example, but you understand what I'm saying there. And you're also saying how musicians people to encourage people to participate, but once again, if you had a musician producing a negative message, then you would be encouraging people to participate. And the problem is, you did say that they provide a different commentary on situations, but I think that could possibly be taken as a problem, because if you have people, artists in higher status in society, which young people, they admire, they idolise, they want to be like, if you have this person constantly feeding an information, their opinion, then you're going to have a load of young people not thinking and wanting to find out their opinions for themselves. They're going to be spoon-fed ideas. And the problem with that is, once again, it can be used negatively, but it also links to your point about it being a form of expression. It actually discourages expression, because sorry, I'm a bit nervous. It discourages expression, because if if you had a member of society feeding people this information, young people or people who are easily influenced are not going to be looking for their own expression, they'll be expressing someone else's views. It's imperative for politics and for art that people find their own ways, and their own opinions on certain subjects, and it is not in anybody else's right, therefore, to people to be spoon-fed. And for that reason, music can quite easily be used as a tool for propaganda, as once again Sam said. So therefore, obviously, I think, whilst as you said, I do agree with you to the fact that music is expression. You're right. So music is expression, and that people should be able to express political views, but it should not be used as a tool in any sort of way. It should not be used for movements. It should not be used in politics, because in the same way it can be used positively, it can be used negatively. And unfortunately, young people of this generation are too easily influenced by people in a position, so like these big music artists, in order to be influenced by these opinions. And actually, I don't have anything to say. Actually, I'm good.
Yeah, so we'd just like to thank each of the speakers for their input into the debate. I just have one point before we open the debate up to the floor. Would you agree that today's music creates a climate for which it's not actually constructive for political change? For example, the violence and the crime that is sort of associated with modern rap, hip hop, and like London's grime scene. So I'm going to quote an MC in South London. Who goes by the name of Terminator. I don't knife for fun. I knife for mum.
If she backs the wall, then I'm not for lunch.
Now my question to both, well, mainly to the proposition, is surely these sort of artists shouldn't really be expressing their political views.
What I seem to get worried about is whenever something goes wrong in television, I just say, God, please don't make me a black person, because one of us is always used to judge everybody. So one grime artist is used to judge all the grime artists, or one rap artist is used to judge all the rap artists, and whenever they do something positive, you don't hear about it. So if it's in media, I think it is not, even media is skewed. So I would say, well, you know, it doesn't, if you have one bad penny or one bad apple, does not spoil the barrel. But it usually is the case in the point of, well, from the media. So I think as it's positive. Music.
Majority?
Well, the majority of like the majority of rap music, as you cannot just use gangster rap. It's just a part of a genre. You cannot just say, because you don't hear anybody saying rock is bad. You don't hear people say punk is bad.
You do.
No, but it's not considered as globally as a bad thing. When you hear rap, there's certain connotations, isn't there?
Yeah,
Baggy. No, it has certain connotations.
Can we please hear them
Okay,
now?
yeah, go on.
Well, I don't want to turn this into a completely different debate, so...
But but like I said, it reflects life.
Jordan wants to
Okay, the
advise.
first problem with your question is that's not a political statement, so I don't know why you brought it up.
It is a political statement. When you talk about
No. Wait. You've had your turn to speak. You've had your turn to speak.
Keep talking, just keep talking.
Basically, yeah. No, I'll tell you why it's not a political statement. Because yes, okay, you can generalise rap artists, MCs, or any other music genre if you want to. Okay. But the problem is, you're talking about a grime MC, but there are also political hip hop artists. Okay, so if we're going to be talking about politics in music, we should be talking about political musicians with a political message. Terminator MC doesn't have a political message, so really we shouldn't be speaking about him. But if you want to talk about, like, for example, there is a strong movement in Eastern Europe of very, very white supremacist, racist hip hop. But on the other hand, there is also movements in the Western side of the world, or even or in other places of the world, where there's a very liberal and more open message for hip hop, and also there is a political message of hip hop that encourages people to think. Except so.
The reason why I say it was something that what David Starkey came out with commentate. He came out with a comment after writing saying, "Oh, I was thinking." What Starkey said? Starkey said, "You know what? The 50% white were trying to behave like Jamaicans, right? And that's where you go. No matter what happens, it always runs that. It always ends up with some politician dragging the grime, dragging all the negative things about a certain part of us as a group, and labelling the entire group. So it's political because they use it as a code to get to certain type of voters. Oh, we don't want them there because this is what they do, and listen to the music, and it causes them to do bad things.
Yeah, and point of information, that's music in politics, not politics in music. The discussion is, does politics have a place in music, not does music have a place in politics. So
does politics have a place in music? But like
yeah,
I said,
that means content. It doesn't mean what use the politicians have for the music. So that's a completely different argument.
Alright guys, we're going to have to open it up to the floor now. Any questions around Nick? Oh, I love them.
I just wanted to ask people's thoughts about Kanye West, who often talks about bringing down the establishment. What did Mr. Marlowe and Jordan in particular have to say about Kanye West?
what about me?
Alright boys, can we hear Mr. Marlowe?
Yeah, what I would say about Kanye West is, for me, having to listen to hip hop for a long time, I think what the kind of the journey that Kanye West has been on, I think says a lot about how conformist music is today. So when Kanye West starts out, he has tracks on his albums which, you know, he has tracks which address things like, for example, the American government's action against the Black Panthers. He has tracks about the kind of pernicious effect of welfare. But I think that the problem for me is, unlike, for example, someone like Chuck D and Public Enemy, as Kanye West's profile has grown, he's become more and more narcissistic, and it's also as well, it's become all about himself. It's as if the rest of the world has ceased to exist for Kanye West. Whereas before, he'd go on, on live TV and say George Bush doesn't care about black people, which in many ways was a fairly mild statement, because it was evident to everyone seeing the Katrina fallout that was the case. But at the time, certainly in America, it was considered radical. But I feel now, as he in an attempt possibly to keep his media profile high, his music, the nature of his music has changed. I just think it's a shame that, initially being very political as he was, he's become more and more narcissistic. He's become more self-obsessed. So he now rages in the media about the fact that he isn't creative director of Louis Vuitton and things like that, which the African Americans face a huge number of issues there. I'm not arguing that Kanye West should be their sole spokesperson, but given that he often feels himself to be someone that's worth listening to, maybe he should kind of look beyond his own life experience.
Jordan, do you have anything to add to that? Chris William.
Yeah, your argument that it's not freedom of expression because you're actually putting your expressions onto other people. Surely, but in that case, you should get rid of political writings and political speeches and anything that kind of puts an opinion to other people then.
Yeah, I just think that, as I said, music is an art form. It's different with political writings. Things like Animal Farm and 1984, as we used by an example here, he's not really actually making a piece of art. It was a political treatise disguised as a novel. So I think that in terms of music, since it's an art form, since it's supposed to be about creating something, for the pleasure and the enjoyment of it, it shouldn't be used to influence other people. Political writings and speeches and things like that, fine, use them, because they're not an art form, and they're not supposed to be a creative, beautiful thing, as music is. So it's different.
Yeah, I think.
Could I just answer that? It's only since the turn of the 20th century that art has been considered as a beautiful thing. It's only recently with modern art that it's been considered as a beautiful thing. Before
I
art.
disagree.
Pardon?
I disagree.
Well, you can disagree. I'm just telling you the fact that I learnt when I was in art college. I can't help that, but I can't help that. That was something that I learned and something that I experienced. I cannot help that, but if you want to disagree with it,
Well, you
that's
can
fine.
throw your education around, or, like, it doesn't really mean anything here. Like, all I'm saying is, I'm sure that all the Renaissance artists who simply did studies of the human form and painted, you know, people for people's sake and art for, you know, beautiful women purely for the concept of the study of the human anatomy had nothing to do with political leanings. So you can't just say that
They
all
were
art
paint-
from the turn of the century.
They had patrons, didn't they?
So.
So their patrons told them what to paint, how to paint it, and if they did something that wasn't right, what do you think would happen to that painting?
Well, that's not relevant.
No, it is relevant.
It's not, because like, you're just saying
no,
that.
you
So
just
why
can't-
didn't any of the
you
patrons
can't-
commission political leanings then?
And then as soon as I prove you wrong, you say it's not relevant.
I mean, I haven't played with race politics, so I mean.
Alright, gentlemen. Before we get to Fist, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Whiting.
Oh yeah, now I've got a question to put to Sam and to Jordan. Music is so much about freedom of expression, and freedom of expression is about sharing messages, isn't it? It's conveying a message. And what we're obviously not here to debate today is, I think, what the crux of the matter is so often it depends on the education, the wisdom, the insight, the maturity of the person that's conveying that message. But what I would say is, what's your opinion on the fact that isn't it better that people share these messages, whether it be political or not, through the freedom of expression of music, such that unreasonable ideas and those that are discriminatory can be challenged?
I think the problem with here is that, like, as Mr. Martin was saying earlier, that political speeches are a form of expression, and so is music. That is correct. But the problem with it is, the fact of the matter is, like, whether it's ideal or not, music has a very music has a big influence on people as a popular, like on the masses. Okay, so. And unfortunately, as it happens, a lot of people aren't very educated and aren't perhaps as don't have as much integrity of what views they allow themselves to believe in. And the problem with music and politics is that if you went to see a politician's speech, you would be clued up on the things he was speaking about, and so would he. But the problem is, like, for example, if you took Kanye West, if he made an album, a political album, there would be many people who would agree with him, but it would be quite an easy argument to make that perhaps Kanye West and the people listening to him are not educated on the things they're listening to. So whilst, yes, they are both forms of expression, I think that, unfortunately, people don't educate themselves on what they're listening to. So if people are listening to music, it's okay for artists to express their opinion. What's not okay is the people receiving their opinion. They're not educated enough to make their own, and they take it as they get spoon-fed opinions, and that's the same thing with politics. So therefore, the problem lies in both things. But politics should be not. You shouldn't find politics in music, because people will not educate themselves. As of yet, right at the moment, it is reality that people do not educate themselves in order to form their own opinion, and could be spoon-fed, and for that reason, it can be used as a tool, which is not a good thing.
But can music not educate?
Yes, it can, but not if the problem with music is, and the music scene is, that it is not on equal level. There are a few small figures who are in the limelight and who people listen to on a regular basis, and they get radio play and airplay. And unfortunately, when you release music and when you make music, you don't know how it's going to affect people. So when they do make this music, whilst they could educate, a lot of the artists nowadays aren't. And education would need to start before the music. So what I mean by that is they need to be educated before they are exposed to other people's opinions, because they need to know what they're listening to.
Alright,
If that makes sense.
Can we end it there, please? So can we have a round of applause for these speakers? Special thanks to Mr. Martin and Jordan, because they're new to this. I mean, Mr. Martin was quite scared when I told him about it.
Yes, I was.
But we all know he did really well today. So Ryan's going to tell you about...
Yeah, just a show of hands, how many people think that politics should have a place in music? Oh wow, okay. So hats off to the proposition then for that. Alright, so So I'm just going to give you an update on what events we've got coming up for the rest of the term. So next week we've got James Asper, who's a community organiser for Citizens UK. He's going to be talking, the title of his talk is Washington to... We've also got Gavin Barwell, the Member of Parliament for Croydon Central, coming in 3 weeks' time. Conservative Member of Parliament, so I'm sure he'll be able to answer any questions you've got.
And then the week after that we've got George Galloway. I mean, a lot of you know about that already, but that's pretty big. For you who don't know, he's a Respect MP of Bradford West, and he's a very controversial character. And he's actually been on Celebrity Big Brother, so he's pretty big.
We want another PMQs.
And we're going to end on that as well. When we come back after Easter. Alright, also, sorry, finally guys, on your way out, as this is for Rag Week, any donations would be appreciated.